quite some time now, haven't you?
Yes,
How many?
37 years.
Oh, good. And tell us how you got started and if you've ever done any other kind of law other than criminal.
Nope, never done anything but this. And I was thinking back on it about growing up in the 50s and 60s and all of the turbulent things that were going on at that time really had a big effect on me. You know, living in Austin, we followed the Jack Ruby trial intently when our president had been killed in '63, and then in '66, Charles Whitman went up to the tower in Austin where I lived and was one of the first mass shootings. These things were just integrated into my life because my dad was the district attorney at the time and also in the military. His story about the tower shooting was flying in on an airplane as it's going on, and they're calling him saying because he's a colonel in the National Guard, they wanted to go to Camp Mabry and get some huge bazooka to blow up the top of the tower. And he knew that the police were trying to get up there and who all that could possibly injure, and he talked them out of blowing up the top of the tower. And so these were things that were just amazing to watch in my life as I was growing up, because I saw the incredible pressure put on him to indict Charles Whitman's psychiatrist, because he had told the psychiatrist that he was going to do this. And just watching that play out in the news and the media and the pressure and seeing that that never happened gave me a great feel for this area that he was in, because not only did he do all of that, but he was also a Baptist deacon. And so all of his, besides being a war hero, which I think gave him another perspective of what all we do, having served in World War II, he also preached that we will be judged by how we treat the least among us. And it was something that, to me, just led me into this field, because we represent so many hopeless and helpless, and they need somebody to give them a handout. When I was young, I worked in Roy Minton's office one summer. That was an eye-opener to work in his office. And I went into the back room, and he had the South Texas Miranda rights. And I, had been getting ready to go to law school and study in Miranda. And the South Texas Miranda rights were, you have the absolute right to remain silent as long as you can stand the pain. And so it was a clear thing to me that we were coming out of that period in the 50s and 60s where beating confessions was just acceptable. And we were moving into a much better and brighter future, but we needed lawyers to stand up for those who couldn't stand up for themselves. And I immediately went into criminal defense, and it's been the best decision I ever made.
And you never were a prosecutor?
I was never a prosecutor. And though I have tremendous respect for what they do, they have a difficult job. My dad was, and then became a judge for many years, and he always talked about that it was a great trial experience if you were a prosecutor. He talked to me about the experience of his military. One summer, I remember, he did not believe in summers off for his kids. And we were painting the house. And that was our summer job, was to paint the house. And I'm on a ladder under the overhang, painting the overhang, and we had an undercoat, and then we had an overcoat. And he's stomping around the yard so mad because he can't find his crowbar. His crowbar's missing. Where's his crowbar? Who's moved his crowbar? And about the time that he goes off, I get down from that ladder and I see that crowbar up on the roof. And I have painted it. Not once, but twice. And I thought, for sure, this old man's head, he had a big old bald head, was just going to turn bright red and explode when I presented him this crowbar that had been painted twice. And he looked at me and he said, "Oh, honey, you would have made the best foot soldier. You know the rule in the Army is if it doesn't move, you paint it. If it moves, you salute it." And so it kind of gave me sort of my feeling about how I ended up doing what I do. Is I'm a foot soldier. You know, I go out there. I love to do stuff for TCDLA. I love to get involved in doing different projects, and that's because I'm a foot soldier, and I'm proud of it.
Although you're a former president, aren't you?
Yes, again, because I showed up. And I do have to say about TCDLA, you know, they were always so opening. And again, another Roy Minton story. I'm in his office, and he's so fatherly to me. He was like another father to me, and his kids were always in and out of that office. His kids meant the world to him. But he took me under his wing and said, "Honey, honey, honey, you need to work in my office because you have the most amazing ability to get along with a house full of bitches." You know, this is the way he would refer to his own office. And then he said, "And I know you want to go to law school, but honey, nobody is going to hire a woman lawyer." And I appreciated that, and I do what my husband says I do, that's so much like my dad. I smile and nod my head, and I go do what I intended to do anyway. And I went to law school and was welcomed by TCDLA with open arms. Civil firms were not hiring women. They were getting sued over not hiring women when I graduated. And so it was wonderful to meet TCDLA. And somebody resigned from the board, and they asked me to fill in for my first board meeting. I was so excited because I'd seen Weldon Holcomb up there. For those that don't know, he's passed away. He was a Baptist minister, and he was the welcome. He was there.
Marshall, wasn't he?
Yes, cowboy hat and boots from Longview, saying, "Welcome, gentlemen. Good morning, brother. Come into the meeting." It was just so welcoming, and seeing it, and he always had a pocket full of candy that he's passing out. And so I walk up to my first board meeting, and he said, "Oh, welcome, sister. The wives are meeting next door." And I had to tell Mr. Holcomb, I said, "Mr. Holcomb, I'm actually on the board." And he got the biggest smile. "Oh my God, well, welcome, sister. We're glad to have you. Have some candy. Come into your board meeting." So I have to say, of the things that I've seen changed, it's the incredible impact that women have had on TCDLA, and the huge change by having women involved in our organization.
And how else have you seen the practice change in your career?
Well, I would say that when I started, anybody could, if you had a pulse, you could walk over and put your name on the court-appointed list. They were begging for people. And at the time that I started, our jail was condemned, but we still had it open at the top of the courthouse, sitting on top of the courthouse. Had an old elevator that they had to have an operator to run, as you guess the doors closed, and he cranked you up to the top of the courthouse, and you got out. And some very wise lawyers had told me, you know, be sure and let the client go in that tiny little room first, because that's really where all the water is going to drip down from the ceiling, and we hope to God it's water. And your back's to the door in case you need an exit.
Yeah.
And so I'm in one of those, and we had two judges, Judge Thurman and Judge Blackwell. And because I was on the appointment list, and my dad was one of the judges, all of my cases went to Judge Thurman. And those of us that knew, you really wanted Judge Blackwell. But Judge Thurman was a dear friend of mine, and he taught me a lot. And I'm walking in to tell this court-appointed client for the first time, you know, you've been assigned to Judge Thurman. And I'm kind of anxious about what he's going to say. And he goes, "Oh, thank God, that Judge Blackwell sends his own kids to prison." And I'm just, "Oh, okay. Okay, well, I'm glad you're happy." And so I got to try a lot of cases. I got to be with a lot of really good lawyers. And now I think it's more difficult. You know, we have implemented more standards for court-appointed attorneys, and so a lot of times it is really, really difficult for young lawyers to get that trial experience. So I tell them, please volunteer, please go watch these great lawyers. Anytime I got a chance to hear Racehorse or Warren Burnett speak, I read a whole book about Clarence Darrow, was just the most amazing lawyer. Final arguments that went for days, you know, just amazing. And of course, Percy Foreman. My dad adored Percy Foreman, thought the world revolved around Percy Foreman. But that's what young lawyers can do, and that's really different, I think, with young lawyers.
And what other advice would you give to somebody? We often call them baby lawyers, but for those just beginning their career out of law school.
Well, what I tell people is that if you want to do this, you really need to just have a basic caring about people. Again, I go back to my upbringing, and my dad's prayers were always, keep us ever mindful of the needs of others and teach us to love mercy, do justice, and walk humbly with God. And you hear that every night at dinner. It means something to you, and so you have to go into this because you care about people. If you're going into this to make money, all I can hear is Racehorse Haynes saying, you have made a serious miscalculation of judgment. And I think of Doug Tinker and him talking to one of his clients mid-trial that was not going well, and he turns to him and says, you need to expedite your plans for escape. And that's what you need to do, is get out of the criminal field if you think it's the one that you want to make money. You have to care about people. You have to care about their lives. You have to care about what happens to them.
Yeah, yeah. Now, you've been pretty involved with the state bar for many years, haven't you?
Yes.
And what
I was on
how has that
the
been to you?
Commission for Lawyer Discipline, again, because somebody from TCDLA picked up the phone and called me on a Friday afternoon. Yes, I'm in the office on Friday afternoon. I learned very young, early lawyer. My clients get paid on Friday. They will not have it on Saturday. So if you want your money, you better be in the office on Friday afternoon. So I'm there Friday afternoon, get a call from TCDLA member saying, the Commission for Lawyer Discipline needs a criminal lawyer. They don't have any criminal lawyers. It's been forever since they've had a criminal lawyer. I don't even know what it is. And I'm like, okay, yes, sir. You want me to do that again? My foot soldier. You know, I'll do it. And it turned out it runs the entire grievance system for the entire state of Texas. And shortly after being named to it, the chair resigned, and so they made me chair for 5 years. And I do get to tell a good story about Catherine Shelton, because she is no longer a lawyer, and all of this is public information, and so much of the grievance is private. But she was kind of a notorious lawyer in Houston first, suspected of a paramour disappearing, believing to be dead, that they couldn't figure out what happened to him. And so when some reporter came to talk to her about it, she shot him, went to prison, got out of prison, and was still practicing law. And went to Dallas, moved to Dallas, started some kind of immigration lawyer, and had a falling out with her secretary and her husband. The secretary gets shot, the husband gets killed, and of course the focus turns to Miss Skelton, and they eventually convict her husband of the murder. And so A&E has this whole program about Catherine Skelton and all these different horrific things that have happened, and the tagline at the end was always, and she's still practicing law in the state of Texas. We had her on a 3-year probation, and she'd gotten found in contempt several times during the time she was on probation. And so we had a public motion to revoke her probation, which would revoke her bar license, in front of Judge Deeds in Dallas. And we got all the judges that she had been found in contempt of and all the different rule violations that she'd been involved in. And so Miss Skelton gets up there on the witness stand to testify in her own behalf about why Judge Dietz should not revoke her bar license. And she's talking about being sick and all kinds of problems. And, you know, we've been very careful about not bringing up any of this past history. We've just limited it to the contempt that she was found in for her probation. And Judge Dietz turns to her and he says, Miss Skelton, have you ever thought of doing something else besides practicing law? And I swear to you, she pulled one of our clients. She turned and looked at me and she said, Judge, yes, but every time I apply for a job, they Google me and all those murders show up. I swear to God, she said that in open court. A lawyer who you would have thought had known better. That we and Dietz kind of had this sort of like light bulb go off. Oh, you're that Catherine Shelton.
My goodness.
So she got her lost her bar license during the time that she's suspended. You know, at the end of a suspension, you can get your license back.
Right.
During the time that she was suspended, she shoplifts some expensive purse out of a store and gets convicted, and that's an automatic disbarment. So we finally disbarred Miss Skelton over shoplifting, and the A&E program had to change their version of what happened to Catherine Skelton. But it just was important. I enjoyed it. I enjoyed the other side of it, which was letting a bunch of silk stocking lawyers know what the real practice of law is. And yes, there are lots of lawyers in this field who have disgruntled clients. Nobody wants to be in prison.
No.
And when you're in prison, you have lots of time to think about things your lawyer did. And this was really important to make the civil bar aware. And I think that's why it was so important to have a criminal lawyer involved in all of this. So I was happy to do it.
And do you have special cases, Betty, that are memorable to you?
I do. It's more Trooper Wet Spot. More of police officers that are memorable in this case. We had sort of a notorious officer in Austin that Stuart Kynard did some incredible